Wyatt Gardner sat in his police cruiser watching person after person walk down the sidewalk in front of him. Most of them were women, and they were dressed nicely with wedges and pumps and skirts, so he knew they were going to the September Sandy Singles event. That was why he'd driven from the police station to the community center, too. He just couldn't quite get himself to get out of the car. Yet. But he was going to get out. He was going to go in. He was going to put himself out there again. Try to find someone that he could spend the rest of his life with. He was only 44 years old. He had a lot of life to live yet. With Jennifer out of the house completely now, married and living her best life, Wyatt had plenty of time and money to move on. Plus, he really wanted to do the same thing his daughter had done. Find someone to love as completely as she had. He'd been working for the Getaway Bay Police Department for 23 years now, and he was seriously thinking about hanging up his hat permanently. But the thought of sitting around his house all day, nothing to do, he couldn't even imagine that, and that kept him getting up every morning, running along the beach and going into the station. "Going in," he said, as if he were letting his crew know at the station so they could send backup if he didn't check in soon. He got out of the car and looked both ways down the sidewalk, but everyone would know where he was going and why he'd come the moment he stepped inside. Wyatt held his head high and nodded to another man as he approached. He didn't know the guy, but most people in Getaway Bay knew Wyatt, so he nodded and stepped in line with him. "Can I go in with you?" "Of course, Chief." The other guy gave him a smile, and they went through the marked door so other patrons of the community center who weren't attending the singles event could still use the facilities. "What's your name?" he asked the man. "Henry Bishop," he said. "Nice to meet you, Henry." They met a line, and Wyatt slowed to join it. He wasn't particularly good with small talk, but he'd had plenty of practice over the years. "What do you do?" "I'm a surfing instructor," he said. "Own a little hut in East Bay." "Oh, that's great," Wyatt said. "I love surfing." Henry smiled at him again, and a couple of women in front of them turned around. "I've used your surfing lessons," one of them said. "They were good." "Yeah?" Henry asked. "Who was your instructor?" "I can't remember." She twirled a lock of her dark hair around her ear. "Do you give lessons?" "Of course, yeah," Henry said with a smile. "You didn't learn the first time?" The brunette shrugged. "It's been a while, and I think I'm ready to get back in the water." Wyatt was pretty sure her comment was some sort of euphemism he didn't understand, and he simply stood outside the trio as they continued to chat about surfing lessons and the best places to catch the biggest waves. He entered last behind them, not catching either woman's name as they moved ahead of him. The scent of coconuts and suntan oil met his nose when he entered the room after logging his name with the clerk standing at the door. This singles event was a free couple of hours on a Friday night, and with summer in full swing, Wyatt had decided now was a great time to branch out of his usual find-a-date tactics. That honestly wasn't hard, because he currently had no tactics to find a date. Most of the women he came in contact with were under arrest or employees. The department didn't have rules against relationships among co-workers, as long as all the proper paperwork was filed. But Wyatt had never wanted to be with a fellow cop. Piper had been his complete opposite in every way, and he'd loved her with everything in him. When she'd died, a piece of Wyatt had died too. For a while there, he'd thought it was the most important part of himself. But through his grief counseling, and with the passage of time, he'd learned that he still had the capacity to love. He'd seen friends move past difficult divorces as well as the loss of loved ones. One of his good friends from their grief meetings had just gotten married, and Wyatt had been spurred by Cal's example to find his own date. "Tonight," he told himself as he surveyed the room.